Great, so I'm calling the meeting to order, Environment, Infrastructure, Transportation Policies Committee. Welcome back, everyone. If you've been reading the papers, you'll know that we haven't met since June, and I'm assured by staff that this is simply for the reasons stated at the time, that there wasn't any committee business in it. Someone doesn't want me to say that. There was no committee business for the last 3 months, so anyway, we need to approve the agenda. You'll see it's in your package, so I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Councillor Holland. So are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we will vote on the agenda as printed. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. The minutes from our last meeting, which I just mentioned, was in June. Got a chance to have a look at them. We need them moved and seconded to get them on the floor. Moved by Councillor Schell. Seconded by Councillor Neal. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none. Excuse me. We will vote on the minutes. All those in favor? Opposed, and that carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Here comes another committee member. Okay, well then we're up to our first item, which is a delegation from Mr. Doug Struthers, friend of mine, and the chair of the Rideau Corridor Landscape Strategy Committee, which is a regional committee that Kingston is part of, and I'm actually your representative, your council representative on that committee. He recently presided over an awards ceremony. He's going to tell us all about it, and you'll be able to ask questions at the end. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Struthers.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, indeed, I am Doug Struthers, and I do chair the Steering Committee for the Rideau Corridor Landscape Strategy. The Steering Committee is made up of representatives from the 13 municipalities on the Rideau Corridor, the 3 counties, the 2 conservation authorities, the National Capital Commission, the provincial government, the federal government through Parks Canada, and the First Nations. What is the history of the steering committee being that? Well, at a World Heritage Site designation, there was a UNESCO recommendation, I'll read it quickly, that following the completion of a study of the visual setting of the Rideau Canal, consideration is given to strengthening its visual protection outside the buffer zone in order to ensure the visual values of the setting are protected alongside environmental values. Who's going to help work with that? So in 2008, there was a meeting to discuss 2008, 2009, and the steering committee was formed in 2010 to be inclusive. So there's representation up and down the corridor and with senior levels of government. I think it's worth this year putting some perspective, the history and the value of the Rideau Canal. I won't go back to the building of it, although the building of it is significant, if you recall, after the War of 1812. There was concern, what if the Americans came back again aggressively? Our military supply route of the day was the St. Lawrence and the part of the Great Lakes. So the Rideau Canal was built to have that more secure military supply route. Over the course of time, obviously, it became a commercial use, et cetera. But here, here we are, 2017, our sesquicentennial. We're celebrating our 150th anniversary of the founding of Canada. But can you imagine, think back, 1860s, 66, 67. If we did form a government, if we did form a country, could it indeed be truly true north, strong, and free? Well, with the Rideau Canal there was that bit of security. Well, we'd be able to defend ourselves. So, it's I would suggest a cornerstone of the foundation of our country, one of the Rideau Canal. I referenced, the commercial development into tourism. I'm the former mayor of Merrickville. Our branding logo is Jewel of the Rideau. Our corporate logo is Ad Aqua Florens, by the water we flourish. I would suggest to you that, the Rideau Economic Corridor, all of our communities are flourishing. Indeed, the Rideau Heritage Route Tourism Association commissioned over the last year or so economic impact study, not to be confused with the one Parks Canada did many years ago. That was pretty well focused on the canal. This is from a corridor perspective. To the Canadian economy, the inner part of the corridor, the smaller municipalities, contribute over 600, I believe it's $1 million to the Canadian GDP. If you include the City of Ottawa and the City of Kingston, that's $5.5 billion. You kind of lose sight of, exactly what is this Rideau Canal doing for our communities? The answer is lots. So it's significant, but other attributes are, we'll say that more tourism perspective, significant part of all of our economies. The National Geographic Society in 2008, a survey, the Rideau Canal is, you ready for this, the second most authentic, sustainable destination in the world. Think about that. There's so much we can celebrate, but there's also so much we can do with our canal. But it's also another terrific designation, that's the World Heritage Site designation. And I referenced that a few minutes ago. So it's a great value, but what part of the requirement is we need to preserve and protect the qualities that warrant a designation to begin with. And it's more than the bricks and mortar. It is indeed that landscape, and that's part of what the steering committee has done over the course of years. So we've created what we call the 10 pillars of, not created, we've identified 10 pillars of good development, shoreline development, landscape development, and they're available to the municipalities. Now, unless you've incorporated in your official plan, they are not, you shall have regard for, but man, oh man, wouldn't you want to take them into consideration, because those development principles and ideas came from our communities through the steering committee. So it's what your friends and neighbors and developers are wanting for economic development, which is another way of saying community development and community enrichment. So a lot of great things happening, and here we are from the corridor strategies perspective, 10 years with World Heritage Site designation, and we thought, well, why not have some recognition? We know we have charged our planners group that work for us to identify anything and everything that's happened on the Rideau corridor in the last 10 years, because that can be used as part of what's called the periodic reporting to UNESCO, the world body that not only gives you a designation, but they monitor it to make sure you don't lose the designation. And that can happen. That has happened. So that's something we do not want to have happen. But we thought, well, what about having the community saying, what's happening? What's special in your community? And so we and I don't have my glasses on, please bear with me, the arms will work well. We decided to have an awards program, the goal of the awards program to recognize, honor, and promote good design, environmental stewardship, and economic development through public and youth engagement that serves to protect, enhance, promote, and celebrate the heritage values and sustainability of the Rideau Canal. And I won't take too long, but I will go through some of we had 5 categories, I believe, and we had many nominees in the categories, and then we had a gala on the Friday of the Thanksgiving weekend, which might have been October the 6th, but nonetheless, it was indeed a Friday. And we had all the nominees attend. Environmental stewardship, the nominees. This slide deck is available to any members, if they'd like to see it for themselves at a more leisurely pace. I'm trying to be mindful of the design. The design category I found rather interesting, because the award of excellence in this one was to the Township of Drummond North Elmsley. They put in new docks. It's near Rideau Ferry. But if you look down some of the features that they worked with already there, while there are new docks in place, but they also use the local vegetation, the old bridge and so on to create a new destination, if you will, from a tourism perspective, but also for the local community. Rather spectacular. Hard to see in the, well, they're pretty clear up there, clearer than what I've got. I'm going to come back to this one in a moment. And then economic development. And of course, we congratulated everybody. One of the objectives of the corridor strategy is to raise awareness of the Rideau Canal corridor and promote new ways of thinking about community, community sustainability. It's also telling the story, and part of the story is not just the heritage we have, but how we can work with the heritage to be part of our ongoing community today and in the future. And I'm going to ask Peter to come up and join me for a moment, because you may have seen this when I skipped through it. Oop, there we are. I'll turn it over to Peter for a few moments.
Yeah, so one of the categories was the heritage promotion, and one of our own local Kingstonians won the award. She's here tonight, so we decided it would be nice to recreate the award ceremony. She wasn't able to make the award ceremony on October 6th, so we've essentially deferred that section, and we're doing it here today. This is Doug's. It was Doug's idea to come to the committee, but it was actually Vicky Schmolka's idea to have the presentation tonight. So I don't know if Vicky's here tonight. Oh, here you are. Yes. So yes, please document this with photos. So basically, if you get a chance to get to know Dr. Murray's work, I really recommend it. It's fascinating. Oral histories, series of recordings of actual histories that have been recorded, and you know, without going into all the detail, just you see here on the slide 65 interviews, and of course you may have heard of her swamp ward walking tours and things like that. It's all sort of connected, the oral history of our city. This is actual living, breathing heritage. It's very genuine and authentic, very exciting. So it's my great pleasure to award here tonight the Award of Merit for Heritage Promotion to Professor Laura Murray.
Ms. Steele the podium for a second. I want to thank Vicky for nominating me, and also I want to thank the City of Kingston, actually, who through the Heritage Fund has allowed me to hire both people to help with the interviews, and also an audio producer who helped me do these podcasts that I have a few cards around to you can listen to them online. They're, one of them, the last one, is called The 60s Comes to Kingston. That is the 1960s, not even the 1860s. And the beginning of that podcast takes place in this very room. It's about an occasion on which the mayor cleared the chambers because there were rent control activists at large, and he couldn't shut them up, so he called the cops. So that's the last episode, but the others, one of them is about the Inner Harbor, so focusing more on the Rideau corridor area, and talks about the transition of a marsh to a dump to a golf course, for example. And more generally, it is about the area of the city that's near the river. So thank you very much for this award. I appreciate it. And thanks for coming all this way.
Thank you again, and congratulations. I did, as I about to wrap up, did make reference earlier to the Rideau Heritage Route Tourism Association Tourism Economic Impact and Product Feasibility Study, and I'll make that available electronically to your chair, and he can share it with committee members as appropriate. I think it's an interesting read, but some significant recommendations came out of that. So there we go. In conclusion, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to come here this evening and shed a wee bit more light on the corridor strategy, but more particularly to personally, on behalf of the Rideau Corridor Landscape Strategy Steering Committee, thank you to the City of Kingston and for your representative, with Peter, who is our Vice Chair as well, for their ongoing interest and contribution to the corridor strategy, but specifically for the Rideau Recognition Awards program and ceremony. Thank you for your financial contribution from the City of Kingston. It made the whole thing viable. As we all know, it takes money to do some things like this. And again, to repeat on behalf of the steering committee, thank you so very much, and share that with your members and to your other colleagues on City Council. Thank you for your time.
And thank you, Mayor Struthers. So I guess that was the delegation. You'll see he went over the normal allotted time, but there aren't any other delegations today. And also he could have come as a briefing because this is a committee that has a council representative, so we could have used that slot. Thanks a lot, Doug. Now, before we go on to the next item, does anyone have any questions about the Rideau Corridor Committee or the awards ceremony process or anything that was in the delegation? Yes, Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one of the comments that you made in your speech, you talked about UNESCO monitors the Rideau Corridor. And we have been having a big discussion in Kingston. Who monitors it? Is there actually a designated person or body?
No, no, not formally representative here. But it's the world body under UNESCO. And I'll forget probably the specific committee, but they're the group that is part of the, well, as an example, so 2006 or 5, I believe, Canada sent in our application, if you will. It was a huge monstrous, apparently weighed 40 pounds, all the paperwork and so on. And then there was, in 2006, a gentleman actually from UNESCO, Michel Cott. The application warranted an on-site visit, and I was part of the group that met with him, I think more or less between, let's say, Kemptville and Smiths Falls, and he wanted to know more about the bricks and mortar. He wanted to know about the landscape. You know, I mentioned something, you know, a bit of an off-the-cuff comment about, you know, in the rural area, a thing called, you know, nutrient management, you know, source water protection. And it was like, whoa, get back here. You don't want to hear about that. How does that fit into the quality of the site? We received World Heritage Site designation, but there is that periodic reporting that a country, in this case Canada, must do. And I think the cycle is 2018, 2019, that we have to not just say, oh yeah, we're looking after things. There needs to be, you know, some data behind it and so on in the reporting. What we are doing, not so much what's been happening, that is part of it, but what we're doing to ensure that we are and we will be able to continue maintaining the qualities that warranted the World Heritage Site designation. You know, the easy piece is in the last few years, the federal government, the previous you know, the Harper government, now the Trudeau government, has committed millions and millions of dollars to maintain the critical infrastructure. You know, think of the Punamali Dam as an example. But with the corridor strategy, you know, getting it out to our communities, you know, we understand sometimes it's the rules of engagement, if you will, for development. It's also, you know, the rules of understanding of what we want and what you want. So when I'm coming to you know, whether I'm building a house in your neighborhood, you know, you can, you know, what's the color of the garage door? That's one thing, but you know, as long as that shoreline and what is, it doesn't necessarily have to enhance it, but perhaps we hope it does not impinge upon that landscape. Yeah, in your community, it means something, but also from the Rideau Corridor landscape strategy, more specifically, the designation, is it impinging upon? Is it, you know, so it's, we need to show those things to the UNESCO body, which I believe is in France, but Europe at any rate.
Go ahead.
And my understanding is that it would be Parks Canada that actually does the report that goes to UNESCO, or is...
Yeah, and it may go... and I'm not sure, does it come from, you know, the Prime Minister's office ultimately? No, I think probably Parks Canada, because Parks Canada was the lead back in, you know, the idea. You may remember a former, what was his title? You know, the Commander-in-Chief of the Rideau Canal, Superintendent of the Rideau Canal, Doug Stewart, was his idea to apply for World Heritage Site designation. Parks Canada put the application together, they delivered it, and you know the federal government receives the designation, but it would be through Parks Canada. I'm 99% sure. Yeah. And on that note, you know, I should say that Parks Canada has been tremendous in providing to our steering committee. The lady by the name of Susan Miller, who's a planner with Parks Canada, very astute lady, understands not just, you know, the canal value and so on, but been very supportive in the last more than the last few years of working with the steering committee and moving forward.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, yeah, so the meetings that Doug chairs have Parks Canada, not only Ms. Millar, but also another representative from Parks Canada that attend all the meetings. But I'm wondering if maybe because the canal was a waterway and a means of transportation originally, if it was, like, is it designated a national park as well, or is it just administered by Parks Canada because someone has to administer it?
The Rideau, part of the Rideau Canal is within the footprint of a UNESCO biosphere. So you may have heard of the Frontenac Arc Biosphere. It's part of that, but not the whole canal system. You know, there are a number of attributes. You know, the Rideau River is a Canadian heritage river. But in terms of that park aspect, it's part of a UNESCO, what did I just say? Heritage biosphere, but not the whole canal. The canal, it's not because of the canal is part of that biosphere.
Very interesting. Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay, well, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Okay, so we're going on to business. And Mr. Struthers, you're welcome to stay for the balance of the meeting, but it's not related to that item any longer. So if you feel like you have to go, you have a long drive, by all means, we'll catch up later. So the first item of business is 7A, bi-monthly scheduling of meetings. So I was wondering, as chair, if we might have an even number of committee members in case there was a tie, but it looks like that's not going to happen. So we're about to decide right now if we have the two options there. You see the recommendation. It's essentially status quo would be monthly meetings unless they get canceled, or the other option is the recommendation, which is meet every 2 months and have additional meetings at the call of the chair. So maybe the deputy clerk can introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As members of the committee will likely recall, in September 2015, there was a review of committee's report that was provided that recommended efficiencies, both in terms of the time and the cost that could be achieved for councillors and staff if certain standing committees met less frequently. You'll see a table on your report, pages 3 and 4, that demonstrates that over the time period that was reviewed, there were, for this committee, 21 meetings scheduled, but only 13 were actually held. And that was either largely due to lack of business items or occasionally a lack of quorum of members. Of the meetings that were held, the average meeting time was just under 2 hours. Beginning in January of 2016, the Administrative Policies Committee began a pilot bi-monthly meeting schedule, and they elected at their last meeting to continue on with that bi-monthly meeting schedule with the option for additional meetings at the call of the chair. And in October, the Arts, Recreation and Community Policies Committee also elected to begin a bi-monthly meeting schedule in 2018, again with the option for additional meetings if needed at the call of the chair. The bi-monthly schedule has contributed to increased internal efficiencies. It's allowed existing staff to support other council priorities, and it assists in meeting our departmental and budget objectives. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So there was the recommendation there. Before we get to it, are there any questions from members of the committee to staff? And this is questions only. If you start making statements, I will cut you off. Questions only. Okay, seeing none, we might as well just get right to the debate, the pros and cons. So who wants to move this to get it on the floor? Moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Councillor Camden. Does anyone wish to comment? Okay, well, I'm going to start the ball rolling. Maybe there's not much debate. Maybe we should just vote. But I'm just going to say that basically it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Either we continue to have monthly meetings, which is on paper 12 per year, and some get canceled by either lack of quorum or lack of business, which has been happening, or we have scheduled every other month. Each scheduled meeting is less likely to be canceled, but we might have to sometimes add meetings in between if there's business. So it depends on if you want to do it by addition or by subtraction. But I'd love to hear if there's any opinion on the committee before we vote. But I'm tending to think that I'd like to try the recommendation on for size. What a great debate. Let's just vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries 3-2. Right, on to the next item, which is 7B, amendments to municipal green building policy. So there's a report and a recommendation. Who is going to, Spiro? So Mr. Canellis will introduce this item.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The purpose of this report is to update the Green Municipal Building Policy. At a high level, there are not any significant amendments to the existing policy. The policy is presented in the new policy template. The previous policy required that building projects target silver level certification for large new construction and major renovation projects subject to a feasibility review. However, the updated LEED program is significantly more progressive, and the new silver level certification under LEED version 4 is approximately equal to platinum under the 2009 version. The proposed amendments require projects to target the new silver level certification while acknowledging that this may be more challenging for projects to achieve. Since the last revision of this policy in 2008, a corporate climate action plan has been introduced in 2015 that targets an 8% reduction of corporate greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 compared to a baseline year of 2011. In order to meet our corporate greenhouse gas reduction targets, our new buildings and major renovations need to incorporate deep energy efficiency and a shift to low carbon energy sources. Accordingly, proposed amendments to the policy also introduce the following. This policy introduces the concept that a project may identify an alternate strategy to achieve greenhouse gas emission reductions and energy efficiencies in a more progressive fashion than may result from application of the LEED certification program, and allows for the flexibility for this to be pursued. This would be determined through a comprehensive analysis, and if deemed to substantiate the greater reduction in carbon and energy consumption, it will be implemented and presented in an information report to Council. Also, this policy includes new minimum requirements for all projects to assist in the current or future reduction of carbon emissions and energy consumption, regardless of whether the projects are pursuing LEED certification or what level of certification. These include studying the feasibility of, and if feasible, incorporating on-site renewable energy, accommodating for future rooftop solar panel systems. An example of this is when we design a building, the roof to structurally to be able to support solar panel systems in the future, and equipping new facilities with basic infrastructure to allow for the installation of electrical vehicle charging stations to the extent that this is feasible within the constraints of the project. So we'd run conduit from the electrical room out to the parking lot during construction. So if we ever in the future want to add EV charging stations, the basic infrastructure would be there. And with me tonight is Marissa Mascaro, Manager of Realty Construction Services, and we're available to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Does any member of the committee have a question about the report or the presentation? Yes, Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At a previous meeting, what did we have recently? Administrative policies. There was a discussion of the new building code alternatives that the city is going to permit, so that if somebody's got an innovative solution to something that isn't actually on a sort of prescribed list, that the chief building inspector will now be able to sort of assess and use. So I take it these two were working in tandem, that this is the same sort of theory. Somebody's got a great idea for a reduction in greenhouse gases in the building, but it's new and hasn't been used, that this is a way that everyone can start to use these?
Correct. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Okay. That's great, actually. That's really good, because the Ontario Building Code is sort of prescribes what you can do, and this is kind of saying, we've got other ways we're going to handle this. It sort of opens it up a lot, which is great. Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions? I have a question. So in the event, some of the language is sort of conditional, like, for example, study the feasibility of generating a minimum 5% of the building's energy needs by means of on-site renewable energy if feasible. That's conditional. If feasible, incorporate this into the project. What would happen? I assume it would be reported either way, but if it's not feasible, would a report automatically be generated?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of the question there.
Wondering what would happen if it was found that it wasn't feasible, for example, of generating 5% of the building's energy needs by renewable energy. If it was found in a new construction that it was not feasible, what would happen?
Depending on what the project is, we would try our best to determine the most that we could, or alternate renewable on-site generation that could exist. So in some cases where we couldn't hit LEED Silver in the past, and some of our like the bus sheds project, we tried to get certified. So with this entire policy, if we can't target silver, we'll try to do the best we can. Same thing, if it's not feasible to put in EV charging stations because the building's very small and its electrical system can't handle them, then we'd look at the bigger buildings where we can do it. So it wouldn't be that we would just give up. We'd make sure if it's not feasible, we'd move on to something else that we could do.
That's great to hear. I'm just wondering how we as council will be apprised of the results of such study. Like, would if in the event where we don't meet the targets identified in the policy, would we be getting updates to that effect? Because really we only can react to things that we're told about, right?
My understanding in the past, and projects that we've worked on through possible information reports, but in most cases, we wouldn't report back to council. We'd try our best efforts to, if we couldn't get silver, to get certified, as an example. And that's been the practices that we've been used. We try our best, and if it's feasible, we proceed. And if it's not, we're continually looking at new technologies and new ways of doing things.
I guess we'll wait till we get to the discussion, but it seems to me that the reporting of the meeting of the targets or not, or whether it's certification or silver level or whatever level, it seems to me that needs to be, the reporting mechanism needs to be part of the policy, but we can get to that when we move the recommendation. Any other questions? Okay. So we need a mover and a seconder to get the recommendation on the floor. Sorry, members of the public have an opportunity to ask questions or make comment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Canellis, for the report. There's one question following along from the discussions from the committee so far. What I'm wondering is, Council has created something called a Planning Advisory Working Group. They're just in the process of asking for people to apply for that right now. And that group is going to be citizens who are going to work with staff on sort of bigger picture planning issues, as I understand it. So I'm wondering if the renewable energy aspect in future projects might be something that the Planning Advisory Working Group could get at. It's detailed, might be some specialized knowledge involved there, engineering and planning and that kind of thing. So that's question number one. And my second question follows along also from what the chair was asking. And what I'm wondering is, what are other jurisdictions doing in terms of maybe mandating a certain threshold of renewable energy generation for new projects? I know that the federal and Ontario governments are becoming more aware and cognizant and taking steps around green energy and renewable energy and environmental responsibility. I think we're still trailing a lot of the European countries, Denmark and Germany and places like that. So I'm all for learning from what other leaders have been doing. So I'm wondering if the city is monitoring the actual levels that those jurisdictions have been able to achieve so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Staff has an opportunity to respond to the questions from the members of the public.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the Planning Advisory Working Group is being established to provide an opportunity for perspectives on planning matters. Right now that includes city-initiated amendments to the official plan, or zoning bylaws, legislated updates to the official plan, Planning Act reform, and major city-initiated land use planning projects. So I'm not, I don't think that this would fall into the Planning Advisory Working Group mandate at this time.
Okay, and the second question, Mr. Canellis?
Yes. Yes, we are monitoring and seeing what other regions, municipalities, universities, institutions are doing. As an example is net zero, and the example is the various piloting projects that they're doing, and seeing what they're doing, and trying to incorporate ideas and concepts into some of our projects like the fleet maintenance garage, working with solar and geothermal to see what reductions we can achieve on the campus-wide on Division Street campus with respect to greenhouse gas emissions.
Great, thank you. Okay, so there's a recommendation, and we need it moved and seconded to get it on the floor. That the EITP Policies Committee recommend to Council that the amended municipal green building policy attached as Exhibit A to this report be approved. Who wants to move that? Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Candon. Any discussion? Is your hand up, Councillor Hutchison? Okay, go ahead.
I thought you might have wanted to ask this before. But just to be sure, when you devise the strategy for the energy savings, will you be reporting to council in each of those cases, or just in the ones where you want to go beyond what the lead requires?
We would be reporting on when we identify the alternate strategy that creates greater either greenhouse gas emission reductions or energy efficiencies that's more progressive than the lead policy. We'd be reporting to those. There's a lot of initiatives that we have underway outside of LEED certification with building automation systems. We're continually looking at ways to reduce energy and greenhouse gas emissions. it's an ongoing operations that we do with all our facilities. But we would be reporting only on projects as part of this policy where we're building a new building, for example, or major renovation, that we'd like to pursue an alternate strategy that creates greater efficiencies and is more progressive than the LEED certification program for that building.
So, in upgrading the end goal for energy efficiencies and greenhouse gas savings from silver to platinum, are we saying, without actually saying it, that we're not making the grade now? Because on our regular reports about environmental issues, we tend to either try to downgrade the goal or we have to admit we don't make it. So is this another sign of that?
With respect to going from the silver to platinum, what we were saying is the old platinum is the new silver now. So what we're acknowledging is that this may be more challenging to achieve. So it's not that the new silver is much more advanced in various ways than what the old silver was. So we feel that we're not going backwards with that respect. And the second part of your question, we think we are making the grade, and we feel that we are pushing the envelope.
Okay, I guess what I was getting at is that's fine. I guess what I was getting at was I wasn't sure whether we felt we had to up our game because we weren't going to make it otherwise. And so we had to improve our performance in order to make goals that we'd set under the Climate Action Plan. Or is this just an improvement?
We're trying to do our best to reduce greenhouse gas emissions the best way we can. So under new buildings and major renovations, this is one component of it. Replacing boilers at Rideau Crest and creating 70 tons to 80 tons of greenhouse gas reductions is another strategy. So this is just one strategy or one piece of attempting to reach our 8% reduction by 2020 in greenhouse gas reductions.
So do we have an estimate of it approximately what, maybe it's here, I'm not sure, but an estimate of what the changing standards, how much more that energy efficiency will gain and how much more greenhouse gas reduction that will gain by upping the standard?
No, meaning that we'll look at, in a new building, for example, we will be able to determine how much greenhouse gas emissions are created by the new systems in the new buildings. When we're doing a major renovation, we can compare what the current greenhouse gas emissions are, as an example, from the gas appliances like boilers, and then compare them to the efficiency of the new equipment going in and seeing what the impact is there from a greenhouse gas emissions point of view.
So in general, we're just following the principle that this will be better, right? That's what sums it up. Okay, sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, and keep in mind that one of the resources on this file, key resources on this file, Mr. McClatchy is not able to be here to answer questions. And and we may, so the question I had sort of in the context of whether something needs to be added to the policy, I guess the question would be this: if council passes this policy, can we add to it at a future date?
Yes, our intention in the policy is that we want to review it every 2 years, but we feel with all the changes in technology and new ways of doing things, that we feel we would probably be coming back sooner than that with new ways of looking at things that might require the committee or council approval.
Thank you. Yes. I think we can all agree that things in technology, when it comes to green energy, the technology is moving quite quickly, faster than policy amendments usually move. So, so that's good to hear. I'm satisfied that the policy is being upgraded, and with the knowledge that we can further tweak it in a positive way in the future. I'm happy to support it, but the lack of reporting being spelled out in the policy I see as a weakness, so maybe that can be addressed in future iterations. I found, no matter what you're doing, say you're keeping track of your family's finances, if you don't actually count your money once in a while and count your expenses, more importantly, once in a while, you tend to have higher expenses and less money. So same thing here, if we don't have an accounting of where we are in the green world of things with our buildings, we're not going to necessarily be motivated to make the improvements that we need to make. Not that I doubt the intention, I know staff's intentions are pure, it's just sort of a part of oversight and governance. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Schell.
This may be a question you can't answer, but I mean, considering we don't really build a lot as a city, but the recent utility building, I understand, was incredibly high standard. The new building that we just put up at John Counter Boulevard? Yeah, that it got its LEED designation, I understand. And I don't know if it won any awards, but it was...
We've got 4 of 7 of our buildings achieved gold under the old system, and 3 achieved silver.
Okay, but platinum is the new silver, so so we got to go higher than gold. All right, all this talk of precious metals. I thought we were talking about greenhouse gases. Anyway. Any other comment? Seeing none, we will vote on the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Item C is water/sewer line warranty program. There's a report and a recommendation, and I'm guessing the remaining staff member is here to speak to this item. Please, can you just remind us which department you are? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The report has been brought back to committee for review. You will recall, and it states in the report, that in October of last year, we brought this item forward with the view that we would exercise an RFP type process to secure services and then bring that back to committee for review. In the intervening time period, we ended up in some discussions to try to determine what kind of interest was out there relative to this type of program, and we ended up with basically only one company that would be prepared to make a submission. At that point, we felt that it probably was an inappropriate use of resources to create an RFP and go through that type process. So I'm really looking for basically an amendment to the original recommendation to enable staff to enter into discussions directly with Sewer Line Warranties of Canada, determine what the scope of that services would be, what the issues will be, and then bring that back to the committee for review and to council to ultimately recommend either that we continue an award or decline the services.
Thank you. Members of the committee have a chance to ask questions. Councillor Neal.
would the usual rule that a single bid or whatever would come with full report to council for approval after it comes through this body again?
Yeah, the recommendation in the report indicates that we would like to have those discussions, then bring forward the information back to the committee and ultimately the council. Obviously, at that point, staff would be making a recommendation either to continue with that single source or that individual company, or to say, no, we don't feel that's an appropriate route to take, and recommend a decline.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, members of the public have a chance to ask questions or make comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did remember this coming forward about a year ago, as Mr. Miller has said, and I'd be concerned about only one company responding to the request for information or a possible contract on this. And I'm just wondering what other cities are doing. I think the program is valuable. I think we could do something worthwhile there. I'd like to know more about it, but say, what is Guelph doing? What is Kitchener doing? What is Peterborough doing? And that kind of thing. I'm wondering if staff has that sort of information and if they're able to get at the contract cost, if that could be shared with the City of Kingston or UK. Thank you.
Any other members of the public? Seeing none, staff has an opportunity to answer questions.
I think as indicated in, I guess, both reports, there are some municipalities that have actually entered into agreements with this particular company. Hamilton being one, I believe Sudbury being another. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario has, as indicated in this report, has endorsed this particular company and the services they offer. It's really kind of a, I guess I would call it, it's a specialty type service. There are not a lot of competitors out there, and as I said, we did contact at least 2 other companies that do this type of thing, and both declined any particular interest in bidding on anything with respect to the City of Kingston. Relative to contract costs, this is really an issue that bears little or no expense to the city. This is really a notion of entering in and providing some marketing support, if you will, to the company. It's voluntary to the public. There's no obligation for them to enter into the program. This is basically a commercial enterprise that this particular company is offering, and it's really a service to the public, but our role is frankly more along the lines of supporting it from a marketing perspective. So there is the potential for some revenue, but that still all has to be determined.
Thank you. I need a mover and a seconder to get the recommendation on the floor. Moved by Councillor Camden, second by Councillor Schell. Actually, I just thought of a question based on that last response, and just having thought about it. So this is a pretty small niche or very narrow focus for a company to have. Do we know if this company has other interests, or is this the only thing that they do?
I can't confirm that for sure, but I believe, and if you really wanted me to find out, I'd have to check, but I believe this is really their area of focus on both water and sewer warranty type programs.
Thank you. And is there a lot of competition in this exact area, sewer line warranties, in this part of the country?
Not that I'm aware of, and that's primarily the reason why we brought this report back. Okay, so just to say that the answer to those questions, it's my opinion that we may only have one response. We might be lucky to even have one response to have found anybody that does this. It's a value-added service that that's being proposed. I remember Mr. Keach talking about this the last time it came before us, and this is something that that is essentially there as a helpful suggestion to our users that they have a way of getting extra security, peace of mind,
even if it's not coming directly from the city, it's from a private company, but it's something that people have the option of taking, and I think it's a good suggestion, and I look forward to the report. Councillor Camden?
Thank you, and through you, do we have any information regarding how these companies analyze risk? So, for example, an insurance company would have an actuary that determines risk based on whatever, the likability or the likelihood of somebody calling in their insurance policy. So, for example, if you lived in the west end of Kingston and you don't have any mature trees on your property at all, the likelihood of your water and sewer failing would be smaller than if you lived downtown and you had a very small front yard with an enormous tree on it. So you could determine the likelihood of the possibility of that having to use this insurance policy. Do we know how these are going to be determined? So, for example, if you are the latter with the big tree on the small property, could you be paying a very large premium on your insurance policy, no different than on your home insurance, where you may pay a premium if you're very far away from a fire station or a fire access to a fire hose or whatever? Do we know the details as to how they analyze these risks?
The short answer is no, not at this time. To be quite honest with you, we've not entered into any detailed kind of discussions with this company because we really haven't had the authority to do that yet. I think it's a good question. What I can say is my understanding is that if your services currently work, you're eligible. And that seems to be the approach that they take, but beyond that, I don't know how far they go, and I don't know exactly what the rates are or the costs are associated with the program. But that's certainly something that we would delve into a little bit with them, determine sort of how that works. But that would come once we've had sort of that approval to go ahead.
Okay, so we don't know if it's a flat rate per house or it is based on, we don't know that yet.
If memory serves me correctly, I believe they go on a flat rate, but don't quote me. I'd have to confirm that with them. It's been a while since we've had discussions with them.
Okay. Have we looked into whether or not the likely, like, would there be an increased likelihood of, say, for example, a property owner who rents their property using the services compared to a person who owns, or a person like, do we have any analysis on who would be our end user, or the highest likelihood of getting an end user? Because if you're buying the property as a rental, it is a bit of a safety net if something goes wrong, because you're not really using the water and sewer. So if you did end up getting a bad tenant, the likelihood could be that you do have something go wrong with your water or sewer if something ended up in the water or sewer that you wouldn't have put there yourself. Are we trying to market these things to people, or are we just providing them because it's a good value add and a responsible way to do business as a city?
The cities and or utilities Kingston's involvement would be very minimal. This is really more of a marketing arrangement or contract with this company. We would not get involved with determining what was eligible, what isn't eligible. That's really a private commercial contract that they would enter into with their customer. Good question with respect to the issue of whether the rental people versus the owner. I would think it would have to be with the owner, but again, I don't know that level of detail because we haven't had those discussions with the company. But again, a good question, but I suspect it would be owner, not necessarily the rental person in the building.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. You might have answered this one. Wasn't quite sure whether what Councillor Cannon was asking is quite the same question, but perhaps it is. He was talking about the warranty provider and how they would evaluate risk. And perhaps his question is the same. Like, how does the owner, say the private owner, know if failure is imminent? Or is it just a case that when it breaks, and you're kind of finished that, you know, you just have to pay to fix it?
I guess I'm thinking about how to answer that particular question, but in most cases, because those services are under the ground, most property owners aren't necessarily aware of what the condition of their services are. And it usually is a failure of the lateral that then gets the attention of the homeowner, whether that's water coming up to the surface relative to the potable water system, or whether it's a backup of the sanitary lateral, you know, and it's coming up through the toilet or the shower that's in the basement or those sorts of things. You know, I would hazard a guess that, you know, maintenance, if you will, on any of that infrastructure is probably nil to the average person. So, again, I think my understanding of how this program works is that if it's working today, you would be eligible. If it breaks, or there's an issue with it, then, and if you entered into the program with this company, then they would respond.
Okay, and the utility, I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. The utility doesn't offer any kind of scoping service, or the warranty provider doesn't provide any scoping purpose. For instance, as when we're repairing, some years ago, you took some considerable amount of time, explained to me how we were going to fix the Ontario Street sewer main, right, and how that technology worked, and you camera worked the whole stretch. Is there ways of having your private sewage technology scoped as well?
Yes, there is. There are what we call CCTV or closed-circuit TV cameras that can be sent down the lateral. And there are several companies in the city that actually offer that service to homeowners. Utilities Kingston doesn't do that unless we have an issue with the lateral and there's a question of where is the failure on the lateral. Sometimes that failure is within the piece between the property line and the main, in which case it's Utilities Kingston's responsibility, so our camera work will tell us that. But it's not a service we typically offer because we're using our equipment to maintain the public infrastructure.
So it indicates that what they do is fairly narrow. Like they do the excavation and repair. They don't do the paving and the landscaping. So what happens if the repairing of the private portion, the private lateral part, if the public infrastructure is necessarily damaged to make the repair? I'm thinking of the downtown, many of the yards are really small, right? And who knows where the public line is? I mean, there's cases where the public portion is inside the house, right? Like I know this happens on Bagot Street. And so it gets a bit complicated about who's responsible for what when that happens. So say the private lateral to a house fails and they have to break the sidewalk to get at it. Like the public line is right at the sidewalk or something.
I think in that situation, you know, I think there's some onus on the homeowner at that point in time to realize where the property line is. If in that situation, as you've described, the sidewalk is required to be broken, that's not a warranty issue. That's a Utilities Kingston issue because that is part of the public infrastructure. So in your scenario, where the building structure is sitting right at the property line, and then you have a sidewalk, and then you have potentially a curb or whatever in the street, that lateral from the main to the property line is the responsibility of Utilities Kingston. If it breaks, or if there's an issue, then our crews would respond to effect the repair. You would have to question why the homeowner would even be interested in the program at all in that situation.
I think I was misunderstood. What I meant was that the warranty provider comes to repair, and they break some public infrastructure when they come to do the repair, maybe necessarily. Then who's responsible in a case like that?
In most situations, it becomes the responsibility of the person who broke it. So we would be having discussions with them to either cover the cost of the repair that was required.
So that's the case between Utilities Kingston and the warranty provider?
That would be correct.
Okay. Fine.
Any other wait a minute, we're already in deliberations. Are there any other comments from members of the committee? So just be reassured that it doesn't end here. We're going to be getting a report back with the recommendation when they're done. So I'll read the recommendation so it's clear that Utilities Kingston, through consultation with other municipal departments, request a proposal from Sewer Line Warranties Canada, that's the private company, to offer warranty programs. Information to be included will include proposed costs and coverages for offer, including costs and proceeds to be received by Kingston, and that Utilities Kingston report back to Council with a recommendation to award or decline. Clear? All those in favor? Oppose? And that carries. What's left? There are no motions or notices of motion or other business. There's an item of correspondence in the package, and our next meeting is next month. Just to be clear, we're having a meeting next month. It's on December 12th. We need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Hutchison. All those in favor? This meeting is adjourned.